Alright, so in this video, let's go ahead and unwrap this sci-fi box into a nice texture so we can bring it into Substance Painter and paint it. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select it and I'm going to click on this button up here, UV Editor. So this is what our texture currently looks like. And the very first thing that I like to do is go to UV and just go to planar, and let's go ahead and just project it from the X. So we can see that the X is the red axis right there. So I'm just going to say apply, and this is kind of the side view in the 1-to-1 UV box, right? So this box right here, the very first one, is called 1-to-1. So you want to make sure that all of your UVs are laid out only in this box. That's all we are interested in. All this other stuff is not important for this project. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually just move it out of the way, just so 1-to-1 is empty, and everything that I begin to unwrap I'm going to do in this area here. But this way, this is kind of cleanly just sits to the side and just kind of looks nice and pretty for us. Okay, so let's decide where would be a good place to start. Now, one thing I want to mention is that when I unwrap, I do it in a certain way where when I unwrap certain section, I then hide it. And I'll show you what I mean as we go along. So let's start from the top, for example. I'm going to grab my selection tool and let's just hold down the shift key and just select all of these faces right here. Okay. And that's going to be the same exact on the other side. So let's do that as well. Okay. So I want just these, and I want to project it from the top. So I'm going to look at my axes, and obviously the top, shooting it from the top is going to be Y, right? So I'm going to select Y, and I'm going to say apply. Okay, and because these are symmetrical, they're going to perfectly overlap each other, and that's okay. That's exactly what I want. I don't want them to be separated. So obviously, if I double click and press W, you could see that there's two of them, but I'm going to do undo, and I actually want them to stay on top of each other. So that's okay. I'm going to press W and just kind of move it aside. And once I move it to the side, now this is the part I was going to tell you. I like to hide this because I no longer need to unwrap it, and it's sort of done at this point, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually click the hide button and hide selected object. And if you don't have that button, obviously on your shelf, that's located under display, hide, and hide selection. And if you hold down Command and Shift on the Mac, so I'm on the Mac, so I just simply press Command and Shift, and that adds it to my shelf, as we actually covered this in our first tutorial. So for me, I'm going to go ahead while this is selected, right, both of them, I'm going to say hide selected, and when I did that, you could see that it actually hid the geometry in our perspective view, but not in our UV view. So if I click anywhere in this area, you could see that now that geometry is actually hidden, and that's exactly what I want. At any point, if I want to bring it back, I just simply say show all, and that is also displayed. You can find that under display, show, and show all. So it's right, that's right here. So again, I put my shortcut on my shelf because I use this all the time. Okay, so I'm going to select this again in my UV editor, and I'm going to say hide, and now that part is hidden. And let's just keep going. So I'm going to actually click here, double click here, and let's do the same with this piece. And I would also like to select all of this and do the same here. Click, double click, and then click and double click. So essentially selecting the ring on the bottom and the top. And again, just from the top view, I'm going to project it. And what I'd like to do now is go to my UV toolkit. And what I would like to do is just simply, while this is selected, I'm going to say unfold. Okay. And now, as you could see, there's two of them, just like before, right? But when I unfolded it, they kind of shifted a little bit, so they're not exactly on top of each other as they were before. So I do like them unwrapped or unfolded, but I do want them to perfectly sit on top of each other. So for that, I need to come down here under Arrange and Layout, and I'm going to say Stack Similar. Okay, so that kind of realigns them back into perfect position. I'm going to press W and just kind of again move them out of the way. And while they're selected, I'm going to press Hide Selected. And I'm just going to keep doing that until this whole thing disappears. So that's just my own personal preference or the method of working, because this greatly simplifies any complex object, because I can slowly just bite away at it until there's nothing left. So that's just a clever way of taking anything complex and making it super simple. Okay, so let's go ahead and keep going. Next, I'm going to grab my selection tool, and let's just decide what we want to unfold next. So maybe we just grab this whole top here. Now you could say, why don't you just turn on the symmetry and highlight the bottom at the same time? We could technically do that. So let's go ahead and turn on, if you say Object X, right, you could see how it's selecting it on the left and the right. We actually don't want to do that. We want to select Y, because if you could see at our axes, this would make a lot more sense. So now if I click and hold down the Shift key and select all of these faces, right? Now I'm going to hold down the Option key. Again, I'm on the Mac, so I'm holding the Option key. On the PC, I believe it's Alt key on your keyboard, and you just kind of hold it and drag to kind of spin this thing around. Then hold down the Shift again and just keep adding to your selection. Just do it really quickly. Just make sure you grabbed all the faces. Alright, so in my case I did. And now if we flip this over, we'll see that it's actually identical on the bottom as well. And that's going to definitely speed up our process. Alright, so since this object is symmetrical, there's no reason why we can't use this feature in Maya. I'm actually in Maya 2020 for this video, so I modeled it in 2019 and then I decided to upgrade, but there's really not that many changes between 19 and 20, especially in the UV editor. Alright, I'm gonna go to Y and project it again, as we've done, and go ahead and unfold again. These are all selected, so I'm going to say stack, kind of spin them in the proper direction, hold down W, move it aside, and say hide selected. Alright, and you can see how we are slowly working our way towards the center. Okay, so next I would like to grab our selection tool, and let's grab all the middles of all these guys here. And let's go ahead and do that on this side as well. Alright. So I'm not doing all four sides, I'm only doing the two opposite sides. So let's go ahead and look at our axes. So we want to project from Z, right? This way. So I'm going to say Z, apply. And these are perfectly aligned. So there's nothing I have to do. I don't need to unfold them or anything because they're just simple faces facing the camera, right? So I'm going to press W and just kind of move them aside. and say hide. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the same thing on this side of our box. All right, so this time it's going to be on the x-axis. So I'm going to say X, apply, press W, and kind of move it in position right near it. And now if we can select all of these guys at the same time. Now the other ones are hidden, obviously, so that's why they're not being selected. So if I say unhide all and select these, right, I should be able to come here and say stack similar. And that's going to stack all the square pieces into one stack and this shape into the other stack. So now they're nicely organized. So I'm going to put them next to each other, press W, and just kind of move them aside. And now I'm going to select this whole section that's been unwrapped and say hide selected. All right. Easy enough, right? So let's just keep going. Next, I would like to grab my selection tool, and this time let's just grab all of these faces here. So this takes a little patience, but I'm just going to go ahead and select this entire side. Just kind of be careful about your selection. And I even want the faces that are down here as well, so right below this box as well, because I'm just going to unfold this whole thing, which is going to make sense in a second. So again, I just took all of the faces that are facing the camera, right here, and I made a selection. And yes, I can do the other side as well, but this is a little more complicated, so a little more detailed. So let's just go ahead and do one at a time, right? So I'm gonna make sure that all the pieces were properly selected. So I'm just gonna do one side. I'm gonna say X, looking at our axes again, say apply. All right, this looks nice. And if you press F, you can actually kind of frame it right in your UV editor here. And let's go ahead and say unfold. Now this is not as straight as it was before, but you could see the reason it did that, kind of smushed it a little bit, is because it's trying to unfold all the sides, and it's doing it in such a way where it has to stretch them a little bit in order for this to be nice and flat, almost like a candy wrapper, right? Just like a skin. It's just flat, smushed on the table. So I'm happy with that. I'm gonna go ahead and select it and say hide selected. And let's go ahead and do it to all our other guys. And we can also see if we missed any faces. So in my case, I actually did miss these two, right? And actually I would like them to be part of this whole set instead of having them kind of float in the air. So how do we fix that? Well, I'm going to select my, but let's go ahead and select them by holding the shift key. And now I'm going to say unhide all. Hold down the shift key and select this as well. So now both of those pieces are selected and this whole set that we just unfolded is selected. And while that is the case, I'm going to say project on X one more time. And let's go ahead and unfold one more time. Press W to move it and HS to hide it. So now if we look again, we could see that that did a much better job hiding our topology. our geometry, but all these other pieces are floating in the air because they are these guys, as you remember. So what we want to do is actually hide everything that's been unfolded. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. So now it's nice and clean, and this whole entire side is hidden because it's been unfolded. Now we have 3 more. Let's go ahead and do those real quick. So now we know what we're doing. I'm going to click Select Tool and select again all of these. This time I'm going to try not to miss any polygons because, as you could see, I had to go back and fix my work. So just taking the time in selecting is super important. Alright, so I'm gonna select all the front faces. Go ahead and do it on this side as well. Just double check, make sure I didn't miss any. Again, as I did before, I think this is good. All right, I'm gonna look here. I'm gonna project on Z. So apply and unfold. Press X to move it aside. And if you don't like how it's positioned, you can always say orient. So you can say orient shelves, and that will kind of straighten it out. And let's go ahead and hide it. Okay, so now we just have 2 more. So the key to learning is repetition, so I'm just going to keep doing it. Going to select my side. A little bit boring, but could be fun if you just view it as that. It could actually be almost kind of meditative, you know, just clicking and selecting and making sure you don't miss anything. Okay, easy peasy. Now let's go ahead and go to X and apply and say unfold. And as you can see, something happened. So obviously I did not do a good job selecting my polygons. So let's go ahead and select these again and see what was missed. So I think this guy right here is the reason it didn't work. So I'm going to make sure that he's selected as well and try it again. And say unfold. That's much better. I can say orient to kind of spin it. We can also press E if we want to rotate it, and holding down the Shift key will actually snap it in increments, but you have to hold down Shift key first. So if I hold down the Shift key, it will snap. But let's worry about that later. But for now, I'm just simply unwrapping all the sides. So it doesn't really matter which way they're oriented or how this is organized or positioned or even scaled. None of that is important at this point. Right now, the only thing we want to worry about is just simply unfolding all of the geometry. So while this is selected, again, I'm going to say hide selected. And now I am down to one side. So one more time. You'll probably get much faster as you keep repeating the same steps over and over. All right, so let's double check our selection. And I think that looks pretty good. Again, we'll find out once we project if anything was missed. So let's look at our axes. We want to project on Z, right? So I'm going to say Z and apply. Go to our UV editor and say unfold. And disaster. Again, I missed something. So I'm going to say Command Z to undo. And let's see what I missed. I actually need to select all of our faces, and there it is. I think it's this guy here. All right, try this one more time. Apply and unfold. There it is. Okay, press W to move them out of the way and press hide selection. All right, we're doing pretty well. Let's go ahead and get rid of these little triangles. So to do that, I'm just going to let's go ahead and click on one on the center of each. And when we did that, we also selected, remember, the bottom because our symmetry is still on. And now if I hold down the Shift key and press period on my keyboard, I can grow my selection. And I'm just going to do it just enough to cover these triangles, right? Whatever is left. Next, I'm going to say Y, because I want to project it from the top, and say apply. And let's check this out. So this is the top view of our shape, right? So we have these 8 pieces, 4 on top of the other 4, right? So let's grab all 8 and say unfold. And next I'm going to say stack similar, and that puts it all, organizes all of that into one, which is great. I'm going to move them out of the way and say hide selected. All right. Next, let's go ahead and unwrap this fun little box. So again, just keep plugging away. I'm going to select all of my top faces here. And if we wanted to, we can even grab these as well. And I'll show you why in a minute. We can actually unfold this pretty nicely. And I'm going to project from the top, say apply. And now what I would like to do is right click and say edge. And what I would like to do is select all the edges, all the corners. I'm going to select this one, hold down Shift key, select this one, and this one. And then I'm going to make a cut. And once I made a cut, I can come back here, select what we just unfolded, and say unfold. All right, and let's look at one of them. If we want to select only one of them, we need to turn off our symmetry. Press W and kind of check it out. So we unfolded this box, but because I made these cuts on each corner, right? It kind of unfolded it nice and flat. So these are the sides, and this was the top. So because we made those cuts, as you can see, the box from the top beautifully unfolded, and that is exactly what we want. So I'm gonna select that by double clicking on it, hold down the Shift key and select the rest of them, and I'm gonna say stack and orient. Okay, press W to move it out of the way and say hide selection. All right, now we have this interesting shape left. So let's go ahead and maybe get rid of these corners so we could see a little better. So I'm going to select all of these corners, and I actually forgot to put on my symmetry. So this time I'm going to select X for my symmetry, and you can see it's selecting on both sides. And I actually would like to select these faces as well, on the bottom and the top, on both sides. All right. Now I'm going to project it from looking this way. So press looking at Z, say apply, and say unfold. All right, this is what they look like when they're unfolded. I'm not going to stack them yet. I'm going to do the other two first. So for now, I'm going to hide selected so they are out of the way. And let's go ahead and do these. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to grab my selection tool, select all these polygons, and tilt my camera this way, select all of these. And just like we've done before, now projecting it from, again, Z, say apply, and unfold. All right, so now we have, press W to move, and now we have these 4 pieces. Let's go ahead and select all 4 of them. And we can select these because they are hidden, right? So say unhide all, then make selection, and let's go ahead and stack them. And as you can see, they're not stacking because sometimes you actually have to flip it. So let's go ahead and try it. I'm going to turn off my symmetry, select one of them, and in my let's see, in my tools, I'm going to flip it on horizontally, right? So now once I've done that, if I select these and say stack similar, it should stack them. If it doesn't, that is okay. And I'm not really sure why it's doing that. Let's flip it the other way and see if that helps us. So sometimes it will work and sometimes it will not. All right, so my flipping is not working, but usually when you flip these around, it ends up stacking. And if it's not working, I'm not going to worry about this right now. I'm just going to simply select them all, move them out of the way. And you can see I'm kind of moving everything that's been unfolded into kind of this top left side. Just kind of stashing everything in one big area. All right, so I'm going to select all of them and hide them all because all of these are unfolded. And let's look at what's left. So next I would like to get these things out of the way so they are not blocking us. So let's go ahead and turn our symmetry on X and select all of this, right? And if we wanted to, we can even, now you can see this green camera right there as I'm rotating, and I'm actually, I actually don't want to select it by accident, so I'm gonna go to show and turn off my cameras. Make sure that I don't have that green icon following my rotation with me. So what I would like to do at this point is actually hold down the shift key and select this side as well. And let's do same here, just so all 4 of them are selected. And let's project this from the top. So this is what it looks like from the top, right? So in order for us to unfold this, obviously, somewhere we have to make a cut, right? So it can nicely unfold. Right now it's just one single UV mesh. So let's go ahead and go to edges and click on the edge of each. I'm going to turn off my symmetry and hold on the shift key and kind of select an edge of each box here. I'm going to start from the beginning. This one, this one, this one, and this one. All right, so I just selected all 4 of them, and now I'm going to say cut, go to faces, select them all, and say unfold. And now you can see that they're all unfolded as kind of straps. Now if we say stack similar, that actually worked beautifully. So I'm going to press W, move it out of the way, and say hide selected. All right, now we just have this really simple shape to unfold. And as you're unfolding it, it's a really good idea to remember what you are unfolding. So remember, this is going to be kind of the energy battery thing inside our sci-fi box. So all of these, I'm going to click once, double click, click once, double click, click once, double click, and again repeat it here. So all of these are going to be some kind of a blue glowing energy. So I'd like these faces to be separated from the rest, right? So if this was like some kind of a metal, everything that's highlighted is going to be energy, glowing energy. So from what side I project it from doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to say X, because it's square, right? Obviously. So I'm going to say X, say apply. And now what I'm going to do is, before I unfold it, as before, we need to make little cuts. So I'm going to make cut it here, 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 and here, because I can't have it as one mesh, right? So let's go ahead and cut it. Right click, faces, select them, and say unfold, and stack. All right, so W to move out of the way, and hide selected. Great, now we're just left with this thing, and this is going to be super simple. I'm going to select both of them once again and project them from the top, right? So this is our projection from the top, just like this. And to unfold it, what I actually need to do is, let's go ahead and make a cut here and here, just like we did before, but also do one here and here, right? And now this should be much better as far as unfolding it. Now if I'm going to select them all and say unfold, right? Let's check this out. What are we dealing with? Yeah, I think this is this will work. So let's go ahead and select them all. So again, holding down Control and Shift, you can just keep selecting until you selected all of them. Control and Shift. All right, and now we can move this out of the way and say stack. W to move it out of the way, and hide selected. All right, now we're just left with these boxes here. So I'm going to project from the top. Let's select these guys and project from the top. And let's figure out where we want to slice these. So probably the same exact thing. I'm just going to cut them here. And here. So I'm going to say cut. And let's go ahead and shimmy over to the other side and do the same exact thing. Perfect. Now I'm going to say cut, select all of these guys and say unfold, and I'm going to say stack. All right. Now the cool thing about these, and they're sharing edges, so this one's yelling at me, but I'm not really sure what's happening here, so I'm just going to simply say show all, and what I would like to do is come up here and select, click on this tool that allows me to select just the shells, right? So I'm going to select these shells, hold down the Shift key, and select these shells. And let's go ahead and click on this tool here, which will isolate our selection. Okay, And now what I would like to do is I'm going to project it from the side, just like that. And now I'm going to go to edges, click here and double click here, make a cut, and select all of them and say unfold. All right, so that was nice and easy, right? And if we wanted to, we could even take all of these faces, because this is going to be the glowing part of our battery. And if we wanted to separate them, we could do that. We could just simply project it from the side, press W, and now if we unfold this selection here, right, it's going to unfold it from the top, right? And that's actually perfectly fine, because these are just going to be glowing bars, and I'm perfectly fine with that. So I'm going to select all of these and say stack, right? So that's pretty much it as far as unwrapping everything. Next step is going to be scaling everything and putting it inside the 1-to-1 box, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to select, I'm going to say unhide all or show all, right? Or remember, they're isolated, so I'm going to click here. And this is really cool because you could see all the white lines where we made all our different cuts, right? So the first thing I want to do is make sure that all the pieces are proportionally scaled before I actually move them around. So let's kind of choose a large piece, maybe this guy here, and go to our tools here, and let's say get. So when we press get, it's actually going to give us the density or the proportions of this element here, right? Now, if you don't want to move anything that's been stacked, just make sure you click on shell, and that will allow you to select all the shells, even the ones that are stacked on top of each other. All right. So right now I can see it says 700. Let's go ahead and set this to like 100 and say set. And obviously that made it much smaller. But now let's play a game. Everything on the left is going to be things that we unfolded but did not yet scaled. And everything on the right is going to be things that we did scale. So I'm going to press W and move it to the right. And we could do this one at a time if we wanted to, so we're careful. Or we can attempt to select all of them if we don't have much time and we want to create a shortcut, and click set all at once. Now when we do that, you could see some are going to get larger and some are going to get smaller, and so that is not a good idea. I'm going to undo, and I'm going to be more careful. So I'm going to say set and move. Let's go ahead and do this. And again, all I'm doing is I'm making sure that every single element is proper proportions in relationship to the original to our original model, right? So I'm going to say, see, all I'm doing is I'm just resetting all of their proportions. So let's go ahead and do that to each single one. Okay, and if they overlap in any way, that's fine. We can just kind of separate them, make sure that nothing overlaps when you're actually laying out UVs. Let's press F to kind of zoom in and make sure they're not touching, and they're not, which is fine. Okay, So I'm going to press W, move them to this side, and now we just have this piece. Press set. Okay, perfect. Now everything has been unfolded and everything has been scaled, which is really cool. Now to double check our work, we can press this button here in Maya 2020, and that's going to give us a grid. And the reason this is awesome is because now you can look at your model and make sure that every single element has perfect square on it. Nothing is stretching. And if nothing is stretching, this is how you know when you paint texture in Substance Painter, it's going to look amazing. It's not going to look weird or stretchy. So then you know you did a great job if everything is pretty much consistent on every part, right? So there's, if you look at every element, it kind of has the same size square, all right? Which is great. All right, so let's go ahead and turn this off. And the only thing that's left for us to do is we have to somehow grab all of these elements and stick them inside this little box. Now the cool thing about UV editor is that we can select all of these pieces, press R, and scale them, and that does not affect anything as far as texturing goes. So we can scale them small enough to fit in this box. But there is a option in here to lay out all the elements automatically, and you're welcome to play around with it. I haven't found much luck doing it automatically, so I like to lay the stuff out manually, right? And I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. If you want to do it automatically, you can just select all the pieces and simply say layout. And as you can see, it tries to smoosh or place all the pieces in the one-to-one grid. But I'm never really happy with how it's doing it, and I'm gonna undo it. Now, if you want to have some more control over how it's doing it, you can go to modify and you can go to layout options. And when you do that, you can try to play around and see if you can get it to stack, keep the shells stacked, but place them beautifully in the one-to-one space. But again, I like to do it manually, so I'm going to close this and just manually kind of place them the way I like it. Okay. So first thing we could do is we can grab all of them and say orient, and that kind of attempts to straighten it. If it does this kind of stuff, I'm going to undo. These are separate pieces, remember, so maybe we can stack them. If that doesn't work, press E and you can kind of rotate it manually. Okay, so maybe that's a better way to move it. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them all into some sort of square so I can scale them down into this area, right? So let's say orient, and now these are all the same, so we could try to stack them. Let's go ahead and do that into one. Press F and see what it's doing. So it's actually attempting to stack them, but it's not doing a nice job until we press it a few times. So again, you just have to play around with it and see if it cooperates. If not, you know, obviously you can't do it. But in this case, it actually worked. So I'm just gonna press F, make sure it's okay. Press W, and again, what I'm doing right now is I'm just simply placing these into a square. Now, not this square, but into kind of a square shape. So again, I can scale them down into the one-to-one space. So it's almost like a game trying to fit them all in there. Think about like you're going on a trip and you're trying to pack all of your luggage into the car. So it's kind of a similar idea. My goal is to just keep things square And let's try this one more time. Stack shells, orient, stack, press F, take a closer look. So it looks like it actually stacked this one, but not really this one. And maybe we can try to flip it. Try it again. So there's stack shells and there's stack similar. So I'm really not too happy with any of the results. It did work here, but for some reason I'm having a hard time with these. So if that's the case, I'm just going to leave them alone and not stack these, which is fine. I want to put them all here. Put this here. Now remember, this is the part that's going to be glowing, so I'm actually, it's okay to scale this just a little bit, because the part that's going to be glowing or emanating, it's not really going to have any texture on it. It's just going to be like a solid color, glowing energy. So I'm very aware of the fact that this piece is kind of, I don't want to say not important, but it's not important. I'm going to press W, put this guy in here. And now I just have one more. Kind of straighten it out, press W. And as you can see, in some weird way, this sort of a square, right? And make sure I didn't lose any pieces. So now what I was trying to tell you is that now if you can grab all of them, press R and scale them smaller, press W, you can position them into this one-to-one square. And in my opinion, you saw the automated layout way, and this seems to be a much better, cleaner way. So anytime you have it done manually, I think it looks much nicer and makes more sense, right? And the goal here is to try to utilize the space as much as possible without wasting too much of it, right? So you can move things around and you can make it tight, but make sure nothing overlaps. And then make sure that this guy is not sticking out, right? It's kind of important. So something like that. You can zoom in if you need to. And I'm almost done. I just have to make sure that this guy is not overlapping. So we have all this space here. So this should work just for, normally I would say this is kind of a wasted space in the UV map, but in our case, it's just a simple sci-fi box. It's fine. It's going to work just fine. So the next thing we want to do is take our image, or I mean our model, and export it into Substance Painter. So we'll do that in our next video, but as you can see, if we press our grid here, we can see that it's been unwrapped really nicely. You should be happy with your work if you're seeing something similar to what I'm looking at. And in our next video, let's go ahead and have a lot of fun painting this thing. And if you look closely, you can see the part that I scaled, right? These guys, remember I manually just rescaled them. And now if you look through our grid, you can see that that's the part right in there that's actually a little bit smaller than the rest, right? So that's what I was trying to tell you when you scale all the elements and all the squares look the same size. Because we scaled the inner part, it's now has kind of a smaller grid, which is fine in this case, but normally you want to make sure that all the grid is the same size. All right, cool. So I'll see you guys in our next video, bringing this thing into Substance Painter. All right, thanks for watching.